Wonder, Lesson 5. Good morning, grade 5s. So, welcome to another lesson on wonder. We're going to change things up a bit. Today we are only going to be looking at one chapter, and your main task for today is to write an essay. So, before we jump in, I just wanted to remind you of this quote. When given the choice between being right and being kind, be kind. This quote is going to form the basis of today's lesson, and I hope that because you've seen it for a couple of days, you've started to think of some ideas or had some thoughts about what this quote means. So before we jump into the chapter for today, let's quickly mark yesterday's work. So there were 3 questions. Question 1, and I've quoted directly from the text. It asked you what it means when somebody says like a lamb to a slaughter. And that is something that you say about someone who goes somewhere calmly, not knowing that something unpleasant is going to happen to them. So a lamb to the slaughter, generally when lambs go to the slaughter, they go calmly. So you don't see them fretting. And they go because they don't realize that what's about to happen to them is not going to be something they'll enjoy. If you have reworded it, that's perfect. If you've kept the wording from the book, I will accept it and you will get the answer because it is something that I was looking for you to get the answer from the text. Question 2, again, is directly from the text. A Padawan is a Jedi apprentice. And you could have taken it further and said that it is from the Star Wars franchise or movies. And then question 3, I've left the question on the board because everybody's answer is going to be different. If it were my answer, I would have to say no. I have not watched the Star Wars, and therefore I do not have a favorite character. I hope that you have answered this question in full sentence, and that when you've chosen your character, it is your favorite character and not somebody else's. Remember, these questions are about you, what you're thinking. As long as it relates to the text and the question, you'll get it correct. Now we're going to jump in and you're going to listen to the chapter for today. Please pay careful attention to Mr. Brown and what he says and the lesson that he puts across to the learners in today's chapter.
Choose kind. There was a lot of shuffling around when the bell rang, and everybody got up to leave. I checked my schedule and it said my next class was English, room 321. I didn't stop to see if anyone else from my homeroom was coming my way. I just zoomed out of the class and down the hall and sat down as far from the front as possible. The teacher, a really tall man with a yellow beard, was writing on the chalkboard. Kids came in laughing and talking in little groups, but I didn't look up. Basically, the same thing that happened in homeroom happened again. No one sat next to me except for Jack, who was joking around with some kids who weren't in our homeroom. I could tell Jack was the kind of kid other kids like. He had a lot of friends. He made people laugh. When the second bell rang, everyone got quiet and the teacher turned around and faced us. He said his name was Mr. Brown, and then he started talking about what we would be doing this semester. At a certain point, somewhere between A Wrinkle in Time and Shen of the Sea, he noticed me but kept right on talking. I was mostly doodling in my notebook while he talked, but every once in a while I would sneak a look at the other students. Charlotte was in the class. So were Julian and Henry. Miles wasn't. Mr. Brown had written on the chalkboard in big block letters, P-R-E-C-E-P-T. Okay, everybody, write this down at the very top of the very first page in your English notebook. As we did what he told us to do, he said, okay, so who can tell me what a precept is? Does anyone know? No one raised their hands. Mr. Brown smiled, nodded, and turned around to write on the chalkboard again. Precepts equals rules about really important things. Like a motto? Someone called out. Like a motto, said Mr. Brown, nodding as he continued writing on the board. Like a famous quote, like a line from a fortune cookie. and any saying or ground rule that can motivate you. Basically, a precept is anything that helps guide us when making decisions about really important things. He wrote all that on the chalkboard and then turned around and faced us. So what are some really important things, he asked us. A few kids raised their hands, and as he pointed at them, they gave their answers, which he wrote on the chalkboard in really, really sloppy handwriting. Rules, schoolwork, homework. What else? He said as he wrote, not even turning around. Just call things out. He wrote everything everyone called out. Family, parents, pets. One girl called out their environment. Their environment was written on the chalk. He wrote on the chalkboard and added, our world. Sharks, because they eat dead things in the ocean, said one of the boys, a kid named Reed, and Mr. Brown wrote down, sharks. Bees, seatbelts, recycling, friends. Okay, said Mr. Brown, writing all those things down. He turned around when he finished writing to face us again. But no one's named the most important thing of all. We all looked at him, out of ideas. God? Said one kid, and I could tell that even though Mr. Brown wrote God down, that wasn't the answer he was looking for. Without saying anything else, he wrote down who we are. Who we are, he said, underlining each word as he said it. Who we are. Us. Right? What kind of people are we? What kind of person are you? Isn't that the most important thing of all? Isn't that the kind of question we should be asking ourselves all the time? What kind of person am I? Did anyone happen to notice the plaque next to the door of the school? Anyone read what it says? Anyone? He looked around, but no one knew the answer. It says, know thyself, he said, smiling and nodding. And learning who you are is what you're here to do. I thought we were here to learn English, Jack cracked, which made everyone laugh. Oh yeah, and that too, Mr. Brown answered, which I thought was very cool of him. He turned around and wrote in a big, huge block letters that spread all the way across the chalkboard, Mr. Brown's September Precept. When given the choice between being right or being kind, choose kind. Okay, so everybody, he said, facing us again, I want you to start a brand new section in your notebooks and call it Mr. Brown's Precepts. He kept talking as we did what he was telling us to do. Put today's date at the top of the first page, and from now on, at the beginning of every month, I'm going to write a new Mr. Brown's Precept on the chalkboard, and you're going to write it down in your notebook. Then we're going to discuss that precept and what it means. And at the end of the month, you're going to write an essay about it, about what it means to you, so that by the end of the year, you'll all have your own list of precepts to take away with you. Over the summer, I ask all my students to come up with their very own personal precept, write it on a postcard, and mail it to me from wherever you go on your summer vacation. People really do that? Said one girl whose name I didn't know. Oh yeah, he answered. People really do that. I've had students send me new precepts years after they've graduated from the school, actually. It's pretty amazing. He paused and stroked his beard. But anyway, next summer seems like a long way off. I know, he joked, which made us laugh. So everybody relax a bit while I take attendance, and then when we're finished with that, I'll start telling you about all the fun stuff we're going to be doing this year. In English. He pointed to Jack when he said this, which was also funny, so we all laughed at that. As I wrote down Mr. Brown's September Precept, I suddenly realized that I was going to like school, no matter what.
In the chapter Choose Kind, Mr. Brown introduces his precept, and we're going to discuss that more in depth on the next slide. But he also says that he gets students to come up with their own precepts and send it to him over summer. What I want you to do, starting now and continuing until I actually ask for it, and it could be weeks, so just keep thinking about it. Think about it as you read books, think about it as you go through life, think about it as you watch a movie. I want you to start thinking about precepts that you might send to Mr. Brown over the summer if you were in his class. It can be anything. but make sure that it is a precept and not a riddle or a joke. We're not looking for that. We're looking for some sort of wisdom to be in your precept. So your first activity for today is to complete a journal entry, and I want you to do this in the form of an essay. The quote, "When given the choice between being right and being kind, be kind," has been at the beginning of your slides for the past couple of lessons. And I went in depth in a discussion. It was a short discussion, but I did go a little below that and tell you what it meant in the very first lesson. I now want to know from you about what this quote means to you. So the chapter we just read, Mr. Brown told his learners that at the end of each month, they will take the precept for the month and put it into an essay describing the meaning of this quote for them. I want you to do that today. And I want it with some planning, and you should be doing a rough and editing just to get that skill of creative writing going. And to just be as creative as possible, but also to bring it back to what you actually think. So what does this quote mean to you? Not what it means to me. What it means to me and what it means to you could be very similar, or they could be different, and that's okay. Your essay needs to be about 120 to 140 words, which is standard. It's what we've been doing the whole year. And you should be writing it in paragraphs. Never ever forget your paragraphs. To start this, you should be reading or looking at the discussion booklet that was sent out as part of yesterday's pack. And if you look in that booklet, on page 2, it's got all of the precepts and it's got space. And I'm wanting you to do the first row, and it looks like this. It starts by saying Mr. Brown's September precept. And over there, you're going to write, "When given the choice between being right and being kind, be kind." That is the September precept. And this space here is a little bit of space which you can use to help you start thinking about the precept. So start by filling this in. What does it mean to you on the surface? Your essay will then go more in depth. If you didn't collect the pack yesterday, I have uploaded a copy of the discussion guide as part of today's instructions, and it can be accessed online. The link will also be provided in the instructions. Your second activity for the day is to turn to page 4 of that Wonder discussion guide and to answer questions 1, 2, and 3 in full sentence. And if you've got the pack with you, you can do it in the pack. There's no need to do anything that's in the pack where they've given you lines on your own lined paper, unless you run out of space. Then feel free to use extra space on your exam pad paper. So the page that we are looking at is this page, and it comes up with the discussion questions, question 1, 2, 3. It is marked as page 4 of your pack. Now question 1 says, "Here's what I think. The only reason I'm not ordinary is that no one else sees me that way. I think the only person in the world who realizes how ordinary I am is me." And this is a quote from chapter 1, which we looked at the beginning of last week. And what you need to answer is, why does Augie feel like he's ordinary, even though no one else seems to think so? Question 2. No one would blame Augie if he were to decide not to go to school, but he actually wants to go. In fact, by the end of his first day at Beecher, he realizes how much he is going to like it. What things help convince him? And one of the reasons is given at the end of the chapter that you had to read for your comprehension yesterday. See if you can think of 1 or 2 more reasons why he actually wants to go to school. Finally, question 3. Augie always notices when people notice him, and you would have noticed this when he discusses Mrs. Garcia, Mrs. Petosa, and looking at today's lesson, Mr. Brown. Like, even though Mr. Brown didn't stop, he knew when Mr. Brown saw him. Try to think of a time when someone noticed something embarrassing about you. How did it feel? How would it feel if this happened all the time like it does to Augie? Share your thoughts here, and you might need an extra line or 2 There is space at the bottom if you just want to draw in a line, or you can add if you need to write a bit more on an exam pad paper or line paper where you've been doing the rest of your work. That's it for today's lesson. We are going to continue tomorrow and we're going to be looking at a few more chapters. If you find that you run out of time today and you're not able to get to all 3 of the discussion questions, feel free to leave them for tomorrow, and then we will look at the answers in next week's first lesson. We're going to be answering those questions together and we'll get a memo for that. So if you do run out of time, don't stress, we are only going to look at these questions next week, Tuesday. Until tomorrow's lesson, grade 5s, I hope that you're having a wonderful day and that you're working hard on all your lessons. Bye, grade 5s.